Okay, so we're going to start things, getting ready here. I see people are still trickling in, but that's totally fine. I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Sloane Meyer, and I am the director for new graduate programs here at Kearney-Sando, which means that I work on programs and supporting new and recent graduates coming out of college. In addition, I also work on the other side of the spectrum with all of our academic deans, student life people, as well as administration, so assisting with division heads and assistant head of school search and things like that. I came to Kearney-Sando from the teaching world. I got my master's in history in 2008, and then continued on to get I got my bachelor's degree in 2008 and then got my master's in 2011 and was teaching for about 5 years, teaching history and serving as an academic dean before joining up with Kearney-Sando. So I have a soft spot in my heart for independent schools and education, and I look forward to talking with you a little bit about the ways that you can get yourself focused for a job search in this new crazy time. But before we do that, I just wanted to go over a couple of the logistics for this webinar, just so that you know how it's all going to work as we move forward. So for the webinar, it's going to be open to raise your hand. If we're talking about a topic that you have a further question on and you just want some clarification, or if we open it up for suggestions, you'll be able to hit the raise the hand button at the bottom of your screen, and then Julie will unmute you so that you can ask your question. If you have a broader question or something that maybe is going to take a little bit longer to answer or doesn't have direct implication for what we're talking about right now, you can type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen as well. If you hit the Q&A, you can type that bigger question in, and then I can address it at the end of the webinar. We'll have some built-in time for that. I'm sure that we probably won't be able to address every single question, but I will see all of them. And so if there's any questions that I don't get to, I can always follow up with the person personally after the webinar. Similarly, we are going to record this webinar for you, so we can share that link with everybody who attended, who signed up for the webinar, so that you can access it later on. So enjoy, and I guess we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so our agenda today is we're going to be covering what does this new normal look like for you. College is coming to an end. I'm sure not the way you imagined it was going to be, but here we are. We're all in it together. So kind of talking about what does the marketplace look for you as somebody who is going into education, interested in independent schools. You probably have an idea of what that was going to look like beforehand, and has that changed? We'll talk about that. And then we're going to dive into the ways that you can attack the job market and find your first job in this new normal, this post-COVID, or I guess during COVID situation. So you're going to talk about being flexible. We're going to talk about how to network, how to let your skills guide you when you're doing that networking, and then finally how to stand out from the crowd and make your application and your skills really speak for you. And then we'll move on to the Q&A. So let's get started. We're going to talk about the marketplace first. So the marketplace right now is a little bit up in the air. March as a month was very, very quiet. All schools were dealing with transitioning to being online completely. And so the things went very, very quiet. And then in April, as schools started to get their distance learning under their belt, they started to kind of come back to the table and begin hiring once more. So April has picked up quite a little bit. In a typical hiring season for independent schools, May is usually much more quiet. As you can see kind of on this slide over here, this is an infographic that we have on our blog. You can see that the typical hiring season is really slow in December and January, but really picks up February, March, and then April, May, decisions are made, offers are given out, and then June is really, really quiet. That's a typical hiring season. And even for new graduates, we tend to see that hiring can stretch out into June for new graduates as well. But in this year, it's anything but typical. So in this year, the March was basically a lost month. So now hiring is all kind of being crunched into April and May. And so we're probably expecting to see some more positions coming in and stretching out a little bit with decision making. So whereas May in the past was a little bit more quiet, we're definitely still seeing some activity. A couple other things to think about when it comes to the marketplace is that everyone has transitioned to a completely virtual process. So, making sure that you are familiar with all the different platforms that are out there, making sure that you are familiar with Zoom, Skype, Google Hangouts, FaceTime, WhatsApp, Teams, all of those different platforms, and having them downloaded and accounts made already. Most of them are free, and so you don't have to worry about paying for them, but just make sure that you're familiar with how to use them, that they're downloaded on your computer, that they're ready to go. That's going to position you in the place that you're going to be ready to prepare and interview with a school when they request. In terms of next year, schools are varied in terms of their level of uncertainty about what next year holds. So it's really a take it day by day reality. And we're still seeing some new positions come in, but it definitely is at a much quieter pace than what we typically see in any other year. And so it's really important now to be capitalizing on what's already available in your Candidate Connect portal. So going back to the Candidate Connect portal, looking at past referrals, looking at the referrals you have open still, those mean that according to us, according to what we've talked about with the schools, that those schools are still hiring and they're still moving forward. So those are the ones that you want to be focusing on. And staying in close communication with your placement associate can really help you, give you updates about where the school is, if anything's changed or anything like that. So going back and really capitalizing on those points are going to be really important. And then the final thing to remember about the marketplace is that, regardless of what's going on right now, schools are still going to open in the fall. Even if they're not physically there, even if online learning is continuing, there's still going to be class. And so there's a lot that you as a new graduate can bring to the table in this new normal. There's a lot that you can contribute as a teacher in these online communities or to a new school community if they're able to open physically. So let's spend some time and talk a little bit about how you can capitalize on this moment to find your next job. And so we're going to move on to talking about those things, but I just wanted to open the floor if there's any questions right now before we kind of move on. And I'll talk a little bit more about the marketplace in general as we move forward, but if there's any questions, you can go ahead and raise your hand. And if not, we'll kind of move forward to the next point. I'll give it like 2 minutes. Oh, Nathan.
My question is, if schools, when they go back in the fall, will new schools hire a teacher if it's their first semester to teach on Zoom, if that's what we're doing?
Do you mean like if you haven't ever taught on Zoom before, like will they'll take you on to teach
like your
and kind of be on Zoom?
First year teacher in general, just not even starting in the classroom, just with digital learning.
Sure. So, I mean, I think it's going to be a case-by-case basis with every school, but I think that there's a lot, and we're going to talk about being a digital native and the fact that there's a lot that you guys can contribute just by knowing Zoom, knowing online platforms. And, if you're open to learning and you can express to the school how you have integrated Zoom into your own life, maybe in the classes that you've been taking to finish up your senior year, any of those things, you can parlay into an experience next year. And so schools are still looking to hire new teachers. They still need that group of people in their school communities. And so just because they're going to transition to a Zoom classroom, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to count you out, because if you think about it, schools, all teachers are kind of transitioning to a Zoom platform for the first time right now. It's kind of new for everybody. And so it's kind of positioning you in a good space because you guys are already coming to the table with a lot more digital knowledge than some of the teachers that are in the room. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I think, schools are still going to be open to making those hires, even if they're going to be teaching on a Zoom level. Thanks so much, Nathan.
Thank you.
Great. And so I'm going to move on to the next slide. We're going to talk about the first kind of bucket of things, and that's being flexible. So it's important as we move into this new normal that you stay committed to your decisions, stay committed to your goals, but that you be really flexible in your approach to achieving those goals. Because as we've said, this is anything but typical. You've probably heard it a million times already from every article that's being published right now, every podcast, your advisor, your parents, your friends, everyone. And it's really important advice to be flexible, but it's really important advice at all times to anyone looking for their first job. In this current pandemic, it's going to be even more important than ever. Because a lot of times when you think about, okay, I'm graduating college, I have an idea of exactly what I want to do. This is what my first job's going to look like. I was in that same spot. I'd gotten my degree. I was like, I have so many great ideas. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to inspire the youth. And the job that I ended up getting in my first job out of college did not look anything like I thought it was going to look when I started that process. And so while in many ways it's still possible to get that dream job, to have it be exactly like you want it to be, in this current situation, it's going to be better for you if you're able to be a little bit more flexible in considering what that's going to look like. So being flexible in location, being flexible in the type of school. Maybe you said you just wanted to work at boarding schools. Well, maybe being open to looking at some day schools. Maybe you said I can only live in Boston. Well, maybe taking a broader look in New England or the East Coast, or maybe even that one school that's, out in Seattle. Taking a look at age group, am I willing to consider teaching middle schoolers, or do I just want to work with high schoolers? And even the type of job that you take on is going to be really important to opening a lot more doors for you right now when the market is crunching in a bit. So, as the curve kind of comes in like this, you have to be a little bit more creative and a little bit more flexible about what that job is going to look like to get the skills on your resume. So a quote that I really like is, you might need to jump in somewhere, even if it's not exactly where you want to be forever, just to gain that experience on your resume. Because the experience is going to be the best thing for you as a new graduate. You always kind of fall into that conundrum of, oh, well, every school is looking for someone with teaching experience and I don't have the teaching experience. So how do I get in the door? The more flexible you can be gives you a lot more opportunities to get in that door and find a school that's going to be able to take your skills and really run with them so that you can get that experience on your resume. I don't want you to think that what I'm telling you is to abandon your goals entirely. That is not the point here. In fact, it's the opposite. By thinking more broadly about what you can do to build your skills, you're actually moving more towards your end goal, more towards that dream job. So wherever you end up right after graduation, it doesn't have to be your job or even your home if you move to a place that you weren't thinking you were going to go forever. So it's helpful instead to visualize this next job, this first job, as a step on your journey to build up the essential skills that you need for your dream job. So whether that's, while you're at home, while you're finishing up your semester, or maybe you're already finished with school, if you're taking on an online tutoring position, if you are serving as, if you previously served as a nursery aide, looking at jobs where you could be a researcher, a caretaker, a coach, a camp counselor, things like that might give you essential skills in working with children, in teaching, in caring, that you can put on your resume. So before we move on to the networking section, is there any question about the being flexible? Oh, actually, I have one more thing to say. Maybe previously when you were working with Carney Sando, you had declined some of the jobs that you were like, that's not for me. And that was like way back in January. You were like, I don't think fellowships are for me. I'm going to decline all of these referrals that my placement associate has sent me. You can actually go back into those referrals and accept them now if they're still open. So that's a great way to become more flexible, is to go back and kind of reconsider what was already shared with you. And if it's still open, and you can take a look at it and say, actually now this is looking like I could be a really good opportunity for me. I think I can fit a lot of these boxes. If you go into your referrals in the candidate portal, you can go under decline, and then you can just change those to an accept if it's something that you want to consider. So that's a great way to be flexible and be really proactive in that flexibility, also changing your preferences. So now, does anyone have any questions? All right, then we'll move on to the next part. So the next piece of advice is to network, and then in networking, let your skills guide you. So networking is just a fancy word for marketing. Marketing yourself, your uniqueness, and what you stand for. And it's also about using what's at your disposal to help you move yourself forward. So now more than ever is going to be an important time to rely on your network to get you through. That applies to your personal life. You know, people are leaning on their friends and their families a lot more than they've had in the past, but it also pertains to the professional life. So, you know, reach out to the people you know well who are tangentially connected to education. Family friends who are teachers or no teachers, family members who are teachers, professors you were close to, people you knew, you know, in a class above you who already graduated and are working in education. You'd be surprised at what you can come up with from simply letting people know in your network that you're graduating from college, you're super excited, you have all of these skills, and you're motivated to find something new. Just putting that energy out there by telling people that you're looking is going to open a lot of doors to conversations that can lead to something new. So for example, a lot of people are back home right now. When you're back home, think about, did I have a high school teacher that really affected me when I was a senior in high school or when I was going up through school? Did I have an elementary school teacher that really affected me? Reach out to them and see if they'd be willing to have an informational interview with you over Zoom. If you're talking to your professor in office hours, you know, you guys are finishing up the year, if there is a professor that was particularly meaningful to you, that you have a close connection with, ask them if they can take a few minutes to talk to you about their path towards education, or, you know, how they've been managing this transition to digital teaching. You can say, hey, I'm looking to become a teacher. I know that this is going to be something that's going to affect me as I move forward as a teacher. So, you know, how have you experienced this transition? You know, I'm sure that they'd be happy to share with you about what their journey has been. You know, even connecting with family members, saying, hey, you know, what has it been like being a teacher for the past 15 years? You know, how has this worked for you? Do you have any advice for me? Do you know anybody who is looking for a teacher for next year? There's two benefits of these types of informational interviews. Number one, you can use these conversations as practice for interviews later on. So you can, since they're going to be professional, even if you're talking with your aunt who's been an AP history teacher for 15 years, you can still treat it as a professional interview. You know, talk about your skills, practice talking about yourself. It's a really hard skill to learn, the way to communicate about yourself and the things that you've done without feeling like you're just bragging about yourself. So that takes practice, and using these informational interviews is a great way to do that. And then also you're getting the word out there that you're looking for jobs. So who knows, maybe Aunt Sally has a friend who's a principal and is looking for a new elementary teacher, and she can help make the connection. You never know what happens, so come with an open mind and, you know, just get the word out there. So then also a way to network is to use your LinkedIn page. So if you go to your profile, use the About section as a place to describe yourself and talk about your the fact that you're graduating. So call out that you're graduating, you're looking for your first job in education, and make sure that you make it clear that you're really motivated and excited to learn. Obviously, you can see my About section there. I've been working for a little while, so it's a little bit more, you know, geared towards what I do as a recruiter, but you can definitely see a lot of examples on LinkedIn if you just do some searching on people who are looking for jobs, saying, you know, talented student and teacher, excited to get involved, etc. You know, play around with the words there. Make sure that you really have buffed out that About section so that people know what you're looking for and why you're ready to look. Also, you can add skills and take skills quizzes to bolster your profile and make yourself appear more in appropriate searches. So if you look at mine, You know, these are people that have endorsed me for certain things, but then I also have a whole bunch of industry knowledge from when I was a teacher still up there. But basically, these are ways for people who are searching on LinkedIn to better find you. So, you know, think about, do a little bit of a deep dive and think about, you know, what are things that you've learned in school that are going to position you for education. So, you know, writing, history. If you're a computer scientist, you know, what are the programming languages that you're comfortable in? All sorts of different things that you can put onto your skills. And then you can reach out to your network and ask people to endorse you for those skills. And that's really the big piece of LinkedIn, is making sure that you're connected to people that are not just your friends. Obviously, your friends are great, but you're connecting to your professors, you're connecting to people that are in the world that you want to be in. So your peers are great, but then also professors and other teachers and educators that you know. Following groups is also a good place to find these people as well. Kind of building up this network so that you have a larger group to lean on in this time of need. Using LinkedIn to showcase that you're dedicated, that you're organized, and most importantly, that you're being proactive. You know, a lot of people could take this time and just be like, oh, I'm just so upset, like this is so horrible, and that's totally fine. But you want to showcase that you're being proactive about getting a job, that you're excited to jump into the market, that you have a lot of energy to share, and that you're looking for ways to share that out there. And LinkedIn is a good place for you to do that as well. The other great network for you to tap into is the Carney-Sando network, which you're already a part of by being a candidate. So Carney-Sando works with over 900 independent schools worldwide, and your placement associates have cultivated an impressive network of hiring contacts and school people that they can pass on to you already just through the connection of working with Carney-Sando. So this is an extremely useful benefit for you in this kind of a market. When things get really quiet, when the market crunches, coming to Carney-Sando and coming to your placement associate, communicating with them, it's going to open a lot of doors into the independent school market that it might be harder to find out there on LinkedIn or just the web scouring for that new job. And so we've basically done a lot of the legwork for you by building those inroads with schools and school contacts and kind of giving you a leg up in that conversation. It's vitally important for you to stay in touch with your placement team right now, especially as the market is changing day by day and sometimes hour to hour. We're getting updates from schools all the time, and then we can pass that along to you. But inversely, it's also really important that you share with us what's going on in your search and your life, so that we can help talk you up to schools and communicate to schools what your search is looking like if they're interested in you. So we can really help mediate that conversation, but the only way that we're able to do that is if you're communicating with us. And so, you know, we're here to help you at every single stage, and we're always willing to talk through any question you may have. Hear your updates, talk about the communication with the school, offer advice on your resume or other things if you want to talk about how to better position yourself. And so talking to your placement team, getting really involved and dialed in is going to be the most important thing. And there are two easy ways to do that just right in the Carney-Sando profile. So you can see here on this slide, there's the My Team. So when you're looking at your Carney-Sando page, right when you log in, on the right-hand side, you will see a picture of one of your lovely placement associates. This is Celia Dairo, who does visual arts. And so if she was my placement associate, I can just hit that contact button and it will send her an email directly. And so it's a great way to communicate. It's really easy. And you can get in touch with them right that way. Another important thing is the notes and feedback in each job that gets shared with your placement associate. So as we share jobs with you, you can rate them, you can write us notes, and you can continue to update those notes. So for example, this is a student leadership coordinator job. Let's say I sent this to you and it's like a dream job. You can rate it five stars. You can write me a note and say, hey, Sloane, this is my dream job. I've always wanted to work at Key. I love student activities. And then that allows me to then advocate and take that information onto the school. So the more that you're communicating about what's going on, if you like the position, let's say they contact you, you can put that information in there too. It's a great tool to keep us in the loop without having to, schedule a call every single time and take time out of your day. You can just do a quick note and it keeps your team involved. And so those are some great ways to be connected. Another important thing to do is to follow our Carney Sando blog and the virtual resources page. So our Director of Communications, Julie, who's on the call, has been doing some great work curating a lot of information about how schools and candidates are handling this transition to virtual. And so she's doing a lot of the legwork to curate all of these trends that are coming out of our independent schools. And that's work that you don't have to worry about doing on your own now. So if you just follow those pages and you can look at, what is the trends in schools? What are they thinking? How are they moving forward? How does hiring look? We're doing these webinars, but that's also a great place to look, is on our blog and in the virtual resources pages, so that you can be up to date on the current trends and be prepared for when those interviews come. I feel like that was a lot of information. It was a lot of me talking. So does anyone have any questions about networking, LinkedIn, Carney Sando, placement associates, anything like that? And also write in your questions to the Q&A. If you don't want to talk on the screen, I totally understand. If you're like, I'm Zoom fatigue. Oh, Anna, great.
Hi. In terms of networking, to reach out, like if you're going to reach out to an alumni from your school, how exactly would you go about starting an email just out of the blue and essentially cold calling, emailing?
Sure. So is this an alumni who you are tangentially in the know with, or is it just some random alumni?
Like an alumni on the Alumni Connect page.
Sure. Well, so if the alumni is on the Alumni Connect page, they've already kind of bought in to the fact that people are going to connect with them being on the Alumni Connect page. So I think you can start it out by saying, hey, I saw that you were on this page. It looks like, I was interested in your background. I'm interested in the same things. Would you mind having a quick informational chat with me about, what your experience has been? And then you can keep it as simple as that, especially if you're using something like an Alumni Connect, because that's a program that they've already set up to elicit those kinds of conversations. And so just a quick email saying, hey, it looks like you're interested in the same things I am. I'd love to see, hear more about what that's like, if you wouldn't mind having a quick conversation. And then, they can say yes or no, but, more than likely they'll probably say, sure. Thinking about it, if you wanted to use LinkedIn too, let's say you find an alumni who was in your fraternity or sorority or a club you were a part of, but you guys didn't actually really know each other. If you're on LinkedIn, when you go to connect with that person, you can also include a message. And so in that message, you could say, hey, I know that we weren't ever in the same, we didn't talk, but we were in the same clubs. So, I would love to connect with you just to talk about, your experience post-graduation if you have a few minutes. And so I think, just being brave enough to ask the question, you'd be surprised at how many people feel really, they feel really honored to be asked about their experience. And it's very rare that people do ask. And so just to be asked is usually, an honor. And so they'll be open to it if you're brave enough to ask. Thanks, Anna. Great. So then let's move on to the next group of things. So this one I think is one of the most important ones. Standing out. I feel like we talk about these things all the time, but especially right now when we're in such a different, trying, challenging time, it's important to find ways to stand out and market yourself to schools differently. And so there's lots of ways that you can do this. I would say the best place to start as a Carney Sando candidate is to start with your profile. Since everything has gone digital now, schools have been Zooming nonstop, right? They're Zooming 24/7 with classes. I'm sure you're experiencing the same thing. If you're finishing college, you probably are in Zoom constantly, and you're having this Zoom meeting and that Skype meeting and this Google Hangout, and people are starting to have what they're calling Zoom fatigue. And so This means schools are starting to spend a lot more time on the paper side of things before moving anyone on to that Zoom round. So making sure that your profile is complete and robust is a surefire way to stand out and rise to the top of the pile to make it to that Zoom round, so that you're able to, have that one-on-one, that face-to-face connection. And so it also shows, if you've taken the time to flesh out your whole digital profile on Carnegie Sando, it shows a level of digital literacy and comfort that's really, really important right now, because they want to know that people are able to use programs, are able to do them well, are able to be efficient in using them. So you've shown that by filling out all of the sections. And then it also showcases that you have attention to detail, that you took the time to look through and answer all the questions and make sure your documents are there. That shows two things that are going to be really necessary for schools when they're considering applicants. And so let's just do a quick rundown of things that should be looking tip-top in your Carnegie Sando profile as you're moving forward. Now, number one is your resume. I'm sure you all have resumes in your profile right now, and I'm sure most of them look great, but just wanted to spend some time to showcase that your resume should reflect everything you've done that's now relatable to working with children and working in schools. A lot of times people coming out of college don't think that, the summer camp counseling that I've done for the past 5 years, they don't think that that's applicable. It is applicable. It shows that you know how to work with kids. Oh, all of that volunteer coaching that I've done, because I'm on the varsity soccer team, and now I help these middle schoolers every year. That's applicable. Nannying, the fact that you went to an independent school. If you did go to an independent school, put that on there. That showcases that you know what an independent school is. All of these little things. For example, did you volunteer in a classroom as a part of an education class before the pandemic broke out? That should be on there. Even if it's not a job, like you weren't teaching, but you were volunteering, it should still be on there. Anything you can put on there that makes your skills stand out, it's going to be really important. Also, making sure that you highlight any digital skills that you have. So if you're familiar with Edmodo, if you're familiar with Socrates, if you're familiar with Swivel or Kahoot or Google Classroom, or any of these online digital platforms, maybe they've been using them in your own college classrooms, that makes you a user of them. And so you should make sure that in your skills section of your resume that you have highlighted those digital skills so that schools can see right away that you have them. Second thing is the personal statement. So the personal statement, I like to see it or describe it as your elevator pitch. This is the place to make your case for why you love education, why you're inspired to teach, and give examples of how your skills from college can transfer over to a school environment. You may have already written this document and it may already be perfect, but I'm just telling you to take a minute in this new pandemic, this new world, to take a look at it and see if there's any places you can tweak it. See how, if anything's changed now that you're getting closer to the end of the year. Consider adding a passage about your approach to online learning in light of the current crisis. What would be your approach to doing this in the classroom? What has been your approach? You can always update and change that document, and it will get updated on the Carnegie Sando page as well. We recommend about 2 pages for that tops, so don't go overboard. About 1 to 2 pages, and remember that it's supposed to be focused on you and all of the general things about you that you would want to share with a school that make you, a great candidate. Third, the short answer questions. So these are a new thing that we added in the last year or so, and the short answer questions are optional. And so the questions don't show unless you answer them. So this person has answered all 5 of the short answers, and so all 5 are showing. But if they chose to answer just 1 or 2, only 1 or 2 would show. But they are a really, really great place to express your strengths to hiring contacts right out of the gate. They're very front and center at the top of the profile in the candidate profile for schools. And it's a great place for you to dive deep and explain your strengths and weaknesses. So the questions are a little bit tailored towards people who have already had a job, but there are ones that you can tweak for being a new graduate. So for example, the first one, what 5 adjectives best characterize you as a person and why? That doesn't have to be someone who's been working for a long time. That's a great question for you to answer and really showcase your creativity and your strengths. What aspects of your current or recent position have you found to be most meaningful? Obviously, probably not a new grad question that you want to answer. But I think the next one, what factors in a workplace contribute most to your professional success or fulfillment? That's something that you can talk about hypothetically and also from your experiences in college classrooms. So thinking about the question a little bit out of the box and answering it, as a recent graduate, this is what I would be looking for in my next professional opportunity that I feel would be most successful and fulfill me the most. So you can kind of spin the question to be more relevant to you as a recent or new graduate. And the next question is a really great one. What are you currently doing to sharpen your skills and abilities? There's a lot that you could share there because you're coming out of the gate. You're the front lines. You've been doing the learning. You've been, doing the work right now. You're the closest to the learning side of things. And so that's a really great place where you can share your big ideas about how you're building your skills and your abilities. And so these are a great way to really showcase what you have already without having to wait for the interview stage. These are often questions that schools ask in an interview, and you've already answered them, and you've taken the time to think logically and creatively about your next step in your career, and that showcases proactivity to a school contact. Another place that you can build your profile is in the online and digital material section. And so this is a great place to share any kind of digital imprint that you have out there that's going to help you professionally. So adding a link to your LinkedIn, that's a great place to share it there. Did you record yourself teaching for an education class? You could definitely upload that video if you have it. Do you have an artist's website if you're an art teacher, or a reel of you playing sports that you've used in the past that you can then share to help showcase what you can coach? Are you a music teacher? Do you have a recording of a performance? Anything that you can use to showcase your skills visually can be added here as a link, and then it can augment your profile. Of course, I always want to give the PSA that you want to remember that this is a professional situation, so don't share anything that would not be considered professional. But any kind of online material, website, teaching example, maybe you gave a particularly interesting presentation as you're finishing up your college years and it was on Zoom and maybe it was recorded. You can share that nowadays. And so there's a lot of interesting things that you can share if you have them. But even just having a link to your LinkedIn is going to be a great way to share something digital with the school. Another hot tip is that if you don't have any videos already made, you can make a quick intro video right through the Carnegie Sando portal. So we have a way to record and embed a 2-minute introduction video using the software in our system. And so you'll see on this little slide here, it's under the videos tab under the materials, and it's in a 1, 2, 3 step. You can record your video right there, and then it will showcase on your profile. And for these videos, we really just recommend kind of giving a 2-minute introduction about who you are, why you love teaching, and why you're excited to work at independent schools. It's quick and it's easy, but it gives schools an ability to see you in action, talking, excited, etc. And so those are kind of the outline for digital materials on the portal and the profile, and a couple of other things that you can use to bolster the profile. Before I move on to the next thing in this section, I just wanted to see if there were any questions about any of the things that I just talked about, because I feel like there's a lot that I covered. So let me know if you have any questions. Resume, online materials, personal statement, short answers. Anyone? Okay. Feel free to write them in the question and answer box if you have larger questions. And remember that we will have space and time for Q&A at the end. So if questions are coming to you as we're talking, feel free to go there. All right, my last point. You guys, your graduating class is so set up to capitalize on this moment right now. You guys are virtual natives, more so than my generation, more so than the generation after mine. You guys are set. And so while many, many schools have had to pivot to online learning and digital resources in the last month and have been scrambling to try and figure out what that's going to look like, and teaching teachers who have stood in front of a chalkboard for many years how to all of a sudden translate their entire classroom to being online, many of you have been living in that digital world since you were born. Interfaces and systems come naturally to you, and I bet a majority of you have already taken online classes or two through your university before this pandemic even started, right? So online learning has been a part of your life probably before a lot of other people are out there in the network. And so you really have the opportunity to showcase and capitalize on this moment and really make a case for hiring you because of the knowledge base and the ability to learn that you're going to be able to present to the school. So you don't have to have taught a course to offer insight into a system, right? Talking about and sharing your ability to navigate in these digital spaces and work creatively in the digital world will be an asset to your candidacy no matter what. Many school hiring contacts are going to be looking for teachers who have a displayed comfort with digital and online platforms. And you are going to have that. And so listing out, like I said earlier, listing out the digital platforms you're comfortable with. You know, are you using Google Classroom? Have you been using it for a long time? Do you know what Edmodo is? Do you know what Socrative is? Kahoot, Swivel, Zoom, everything. All of these little programs that you've used, maybe you're like McGraw Publishing Assistant, all these other things. You're going to want to make sure that you share those out so that you can share that you have the competitive edge in this changing market. And you're not only more prepared to learn these new systems because you can pick them up quickly, but you can also be familiar with them and in many cases are already using them in your day-to-day. And so that puts you ahead of things when everybody else is scrambling like, what is this? I never even used this to begin with. And so really capitalizing on the fact that you come from this background is going to be important in the long run. And then my final point is kind of a counterintuitive point. A lot of times it feels like, oh my gosh, the end of the year is coming, I'm graduating, I need to find a job. And that means I'm just gonna plaster every single job that comes my way on LinkedIn, on Indeed, through Carnegie Sando, whatever. I just need to get those applications out as fast as possible. That tends to be the idea. But what I'm gonna say is that actually it's better, and you will likely receive more responses and requests for interviews if you take your time. You know, if you take your time to craft thoughtful cover letters, thoughtful applications, rather than just blasting out the same generic cover letter just to get the number up, you're gonna have more success, especially when it comes to education. Education is a relational business, right? Kids and students are connecting with their teachers, and that's probably why you guys got involved with this to begin with, because you want to be making a difference, you want to make connections, you want to have an effect and an impact on your students. And so putting that same care and effort into your research and your study of the school, and then moving it forward into your cover letter is going to pay you many more dividends than if you just try and get as many applications out as possible. And so a couple of ways to do that is to really make sure that you are researching the school and the role. So Carnegie Sando will do a lot to give you information about the position. So when you log in, hit that view details button. Read the whole position description that is there. Take a look at the school's website. You know, look at what they're using in terms of their online model. Look at what's going on in their community. Almost every independent school has a really impressive website that will tell you a lot about their mission, their values. They have a community section usually that will tell you like what's going on. You know, even in this current market where things are very different, they're still going to be doing things and ways to connect with their community. And so by taking the time to research that, especially if it's a job that you're really interested in, it's going to come out in your cover letter and in your conversations that you know a little bit more about the school than just it's a school. And so another thought is that you've taken time to write your personal statement. It's focused a lot on you. It talks about your personal journey and education. You should then use your cover letter to then focus on the school. So how are you going to specifically fill the need that the school is looking for? So if it's an associate teaching position in an elementary school, what is it in your background? What is it in your experiences that are going to fill that role exactly specifically with what they've called out for in the job description? And then also, what is it about that school's community that made you want to work there? Demonstrate that you've done the research. Talk about their current online system. Talk about what you've done with the similar system, and then talk about, you know, the ways that you feel drawn and related to the community. And then highlight your own skills as they relate to that. Show why it's that particular school and that particular job rather than just any job in any school. And then you'll have a lot more success. And like I said before, you can always lean on your placement associates to help. A lot of times they're open to taking a quick glance at your cover letter and just make sure that they're hitting the points. And they're always happy to answer questions about, you know, school community or anything that they can share further context about the job. And so you know, take your time. I know it's hard when you're faced with kind of so much uncertainty, but I think with all of these other things that we've talked about under your belt, you'll be really positioned well to capitalize on the opportunities that are still available. And by being flexible and being open, you know, there's still a lot of opportunity for you as a new graduate or a recent graduate to really capitalize on the situation and bring your skills and your expertise to a new school community for next year. So with that, I'm gonna open things up for the Q&A. And we can start answering some questions. Yeah, so there's a great question here talking about schools that you've already reached out to and what to do, you know, now that we're kind of in this new situation. And so let's say you reached out to a school you were referred to, you sent your cover letter, and it was like during the hiring freeze time in March. The person is asking, is it okay to reach out again? It's definitely okay to reach out again. As things have been really topsy-turvy right now, sending a very polite, quick check-in is totally fine. You can send, what I would do is I actually would re-forward the email you sent previously. So let's say you sent your cover letter to the hiring contact, find that email in your sent emails and just forward that with your cover letter still attached, the original email, and just say, hey, I know things have been very convoluted in the in the past couple months, but I just wanted to circle back and let you know that I'm still very interested in this job and just check in and see how things were progressing. And that's all you need to say. And so if it's been a couple of weeks, if it's been a month, definitely go for it and follow up with those schools, especially if you're really interested. And then, does that answer the question? Does anyone else have anything to say about that? Do you want to raise your hand, or are we good? Okay, I'll move on to the next question then. So it says, it looks like the hiring process is taking longer than normal, or do you think that the hiring process is taking longer than normal since it's virtual? I would say there's two sides of that. I would say that yes, that in some cases it is taking a little bit longer than normal because they have to kind of navigate all the different constituencies. You know, you have to make sure you have students that can meet with the person, and then this group of people, and everyone's trying to navigate working from home and having their kids and life and everything else. So it is taking maybe a little bit longer, but I think now that schools are really hitting their stride, it tends to be a little bit more expedited in some ways. And so because you don't have to worry about traveling there or things like that, you know, everything is done virtually. In some cases, we've seen the experience has actually moved a lot quicker. And so I think this is when that be flexible tip is really going to come in handy, because, just rolling with the punches, right? Saying, if a school is like, oh, can we meet here or can we meet then? Like being open and available is a really important time. Another really good question that came up with the registration questions was, how do you navigate doing interviews in a shared space? And I think the person put down that, like, I'm sharing a room with my sibling because we're both back from college. That is definitely something that we're all handling with. In fact, like for this webinar, I had to like shut my husband away in our bedroom so that he wouldn't be walking around in the background. So that is something that everyone is handling right now. And I think just being communicative with your family, making sure that they know ahead of time, like, this is a time that I'm going to have an interview. I need to have some quiet space, setting it up in the bathroom, even like balancing your laptop on the sink and, using just the white wall as your background. That's totally fine. Schools know that people are in situations that, are not going to be, the most indicative of or helpful for interviews. And so just be flexible with yourself and be kind to yourself in knowing that it's not going to always be perfect. You're not going to be in the perfect interview space, and that some things might happen, and schools will also be flexible and understanding as well. As long as you can find as much of a quiet space as you can to conduct the interview. I mean, sitting in the car, even if you can't find a space in your own house, like saying, I'm going to go out and sit in the car if you can, or a closet. Like my friend records podcasts, and she's been recording all of her podcasts in her closet because her family is all around. So finding a space that you can have a little bit of quietness is going to be helpful too. It looks like we have another question. Let's see. Yeah, so this is actually a really great question. So talking about, this is at a really uncertain time, and a lot of people didn't imagine that their first year of teaching would be virtual, because the first year of teaching is already a challenging year as it is. Like I remember my first year of teaching, and it would be a struggle to do that virtually. I totally understand hesitations around that. And so the person is asking in the question, do you have any advice for anyone who would rather not start out teaching careers virtually and have an interest in trying something temporary out for the time being? Would taking a step back and then coming back to the application process next year be looked at as a red flag from the school? And I would say not at all. I would say, this is a trying, crazy time. I graduated with my BA in 2008, right before the last kind of economic recession thing. Not saying that there's going to be a recession, but just saying challenging time. And I decided to go back to school and get my master's rather than try and find a teaching career at that time. And it actually ended up positioning me fine for the next year. I would say, if you wanted to not look for a teaching job this year and, do something tangentially related to teaching, or maybe not, that's fine. I don't think it's going to look like a red flag to then try and find a teaching job next year, because it's only been 1 year post-graduation. My advice would be for you, though, is if you are really focused on teaching, but you don't want to start this next year virtually teaching, it's too much for you to handle finding a teaching job right this year. Whatever you do next, try and find ways to continue to build your skills, like we talked about earlier in the webinar. So if that means that you're working, part-time for an online tutoring company while you're also doing whatever it is that you've chosen to do, that you're volunteering on the weekends for Big Brothers, or you're doing like a reading program, or you did camp counseling, something else that can keep you tied to students. And so that when a school looks at your resume next year, they're not going to say, oh, you said you wanted to be a teacher, but then you went and worked in sales for a year. Now what's happening? It's totally fine if you want to go and work in sales. And that's actually, you can bring a lot to the table with a sales background in terms of talking and experience and things like that. But if you're not continuing to build kind of your skills, it might be a little challenging to kind of move directly then into a school job without kind of maintaining those education skills. But I definitely would not say it would be a red flag. We see people do that all the time, where people graduate, they start hunting for a teaching job, and then they go to grad school or they do something else, and then they come back a year later, 2 years later, whatever. And the benefit of working with Carney-Sando is that your profile is maintained. So let's say all of those, like the hard work that you did on those letters of reference and all that, like those short answers, everything is still there. So when you come back, you don't have to worry about re-upping any of that. So I hope that answered your question. I feel like I talked a little bit broadly about that, but yes, you're fine. You can come back, and I totally understand it is a trying time, weird time for everyone right now. Moving on to the next question. So great. So there's a question here about the difference between personal statement and cover letter. So should you have a specific personal statement that writes about how you will fill the specific teaching job and the community, or should this be in your cover letter? So basically, think about it 2 ways. The personal statement is general. It's going to be shared with every school that you send your materials to or that you're referred to. Okay, so you wouldn't want to have specifics in there about any particular teaching job or community, because it might not apply to every job that you're sending it to. So it's really more a general statement with grounded in specifics about yourself. So for example, when I had my personal statement for Carney-Sando, because I was a Carney-Sando candidate, it talked a lot about my approach to, as a history teacher, I taught history. So it talked a lot about my approach to teaching history, why I enjoy teaching history, and how I do that in my classroom, right? And so that was specifics to me. Obviously, you guys don't have classrooms. You have not taught. You are just starting. And so for you, I would say really grounding your personal statement in what brought you to this point. Why do you love education? How have you worked with kids? And why do you want to keep working with kids? And then what is it about independent schools generally that you are drawn to? That's what you need to cover in the personal statement. And you can cover that however you'd like. Then every job that you're referred to at Carney-Sando, they usually ask for a cover letter as follow-up. They'll have your personal statement already, and so they'll already know all of that personal background about what brought you to the table for education, why you love all of working with kids, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so then you can just focus on the cover letter about literally looking at the job description. Like when I was applying for jobs, I used to do this. I used to like take the job description and then take my resume, and I would literally highlight where I had the things. And then I would use that to build the cover letter, right? How do I showcase these things? And so that's where your specifics are going to come in with the job and the school community itself. And so you'll put those in the cover letter. That was a long way to answer that question, but I hope it answered you guys. All right. Yes. Do you think that there will be a common interview question that hiring coordinators will ask due to remote learning? Anything that you can specifically prep for an answer? I would say, before you got to an interview with a school, doing research on the school's website to see what online learning platform they are using is going to be really important, so that you are already aware of what they're using. Are they using Google Classroom? Are they just using Zoom? Are they using something else? And then once you know the platform, you can then try and think out a situation where, what would be your approach to using that if you had to give a lesson. So a big piece of the independent school hiring situation, the whole interview process, is the finalist visit, where you would come to campus and teach a demo lesson. Clearly, we're not doing that right now, right? People are not coming to campuses. There are no one's meeting. And so it's very difficult to kind of have that demo lesson. So instead, some schools are still having you give a demo lesson over Zoom. And so that's something that you could prepare for. But if you know whatever it is, the online platform that they're using, you can almost think of it like it is going to be your demo lesson. And think about a lesson that you would create using the system that they're already using, so that you can showcase that you're already aware of the levers that are being pulled at their school, and you would be able to kind of move right into them. And so that's what I would say to kind of prepare yourself for interviews, especially around digital learning. And we have been telling schools, we've been guiding schools in our own webinars that using situational questions is going to be helpful. So, what would you do if this happened? If X happened in your classroom and it was digital, what would be your approach? How would you how would you connect more with parents digitally? And so thinking about those things and using the virtual resources tab that we've created on our website, that's going to be a great place to start and look to kind of build up your repertoire of answering those questions. Yes, it's okay to have some overlap between the personal statement and the cover letter. I would hope that you would have some overlap, but what would happen in the cover letter is that you would dive in more specifically about how whatever it is that you talked about in the personal statement would affect that school, very specifically. The best cover letters are the ones that are grounded in fact and grounded in specifics. And so just saying, I want to teach because I like to inspire children, that's wonderful, and that can be in your personal statement, but ground it down into how are you going to inspire those children? How have you inspired children in the past, or how would you approach inspiring children in the past? And so yes, you can have some crossover, but when you talk about whatever it is you mentioned in your personal statement, if you talk about it in the cover letter, just make sure you're diving in deep into the specifics. And this is a great question, and I think it might be one of our last questions since we're getting close to time. But it says, during the virtual interview process, how do you get an overall feel for a school if you aren't able to visit the campus in person? Yes. I definitely understand where you're coming from. It is difficult to make the decision to go and join a school community sight unseen, not going to the school campus. And lots of schools are grappling with the same question, and they're trying to find ways to make sure that their candidates and their own school community feel like the fit is there with each other, and that you're gonna feel the feel of the school. And something that I would say is, there's lots of ways you could approach this, but as a candidate, doing a lot of research on the school website, making sure that you've looked at pictures, you've looked at not just the glossy pictures that they have on the main website, but looking at the school's Facebook page, looking at the community and news links section on a school website. That's where you're going to kind of get into more of the community of the school. Obviously, the glossy part of the website is great. It's going to give you a lot of information about the school and the mission, and beautiful photos, etc. But you're really going to get a feel for what the community is like on kind of more those news sections and the school Facebook. Maybe the school has an Instagram. Using the school's social media to really kind of get a deeper dive into what the community looks like and what the community feels like is going to be really helpful. Also, during your virtual interview processes, whatever group of people you're talking to, make sure that you come prepared with questions that are about larger community as well. What does it look like in terms of, admissions days? Do all the faculty go to sports? What's it like to live in that town? You can ask the people, especially if you're considering making a move. It's okay to ask the people in your interview, what is it like living in this community? Do you enjoy it? Was it easy for you to move in? Those kinds of things. And we had a lot of resources on our blog about these types of questions, even pre the COVID situation, in terms of, how to get the best feel for a school through the questions that you ask. And so, reach out to your placement associate and they can point you in the right direction, or just go over to our puzzle blog, type in interview, and we have lots of articles about kind of questions you can ask. And unfortunately, that's kind of, you have to go off of the relationships that you are making over Zoom. But thankfully, you're having at least this virtual connection. If you live close by, we've had some candidates do social distancing drive-by, where they've driven by campus. But obviously that's not possible for people who are looking at a job in California but live in Boston. But lots of creative ways to try and get a feel for campus. But I think the most important thing to do is make sure you're asking questions and then make sure that you are trying to meet with as many people at the school community as possible, which I'm sure the school will be providing for you as well. Okay. I think we got through most of the questions, which is great. You have my contact information as well. That's my email address. I hope that all of you are also members of the new graduate group on LinkedIn. If you are not, please go over and join. We share a lot of things on that group page, and it's a great place to build your network. So go over there, and you can also always ask questions there, but you can also email me if anything comes up. But like I said during the actual presentation, you guys are in a great position to really capitalize on the skills that you've had your whole life. And so I would see this, it's definitely a scary time, and I'm empathetic to you in terms of this was not the senior year that you thought you were going to have. But I actually think it's a really good opportunity to kind of pivot and find something new. And we're always here to help. So please reach out if you have any other questions. And I so appreciate you joining me today.